Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to tonight's meeting. My name is Keisha Nash Johnson. I am currently the head librarian at Santa Monica High School. Today, we're going to talk about a book challenge for Burned by Ellen Hopkins. If I sound a little nasally, I'm going to have to ask you to excuse me because I'm not feeling too great. So, first, we're going to talk a little bit about Santa Monica High School, also known as SEMO High. Its location is in Santa Monica, California. Our population is about 92,000 residents. And median income is around 82,000. In terms of statistics, we have about 78% white and Caucasian, 4.1% Black and African American, 10% Asian and Pacific Islander, and 16.2% Hispanic and Latino. In terms of religion, we have about 46% that do not actively practice religion. We have 36.1% that do actively practice Catholicism, and we have 8.3% Protestant. The other 8.6% is other religions. So, Santa Monica High School is actively part of the Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District, and in that district, we have 11 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 3 high schools. Outside of that district, we have one Catholic school called St. Monica's, and it's very actually close to Santa Monica High School. So I share with you a map of the high school because I wanted you to know how large the school was. It's about the same size, if not a little bit larger than our community college, and it houses anywhere between 3,000 and 6,000 students yearly. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the selection and reconsideration procedure that we actively use at our library at Santa Monica High School. Our selection criteria asks for us to make sure that we have appropriate subject matter for our students in terms of our books, that it has good quality and content, literary value, and artistic value, that it supports the educational needs and interests of the students and the faculty, and that it supplements the diversity of our collection. For more in-depth information, you can turn to page 3 to 4 of your handout. So our reconsideration process is pretty straightforward. You can obtain the reconsideration request form from the front office or from online on our online website. You fill it out and you can turn it in. You can turn it into the front desk or you can email it to me. The patron will receive a notice that the form was received and an estimated time of response back on the final decision. Our library committee will evaluate, and after that decision has been made, they'll send an informative letter to the patron. For more in-depth information, you can also reference that on page 5 of your handout. So here is a filled out reconsideration form. This one we're specifically talking about because it's going to be about our book. Here's an example of it to the side. Our mother, Tiffany Mu, she's a mother of 3. She has 2 students currently at Santa Monica High School. One is in 9th grade and the other is in 11th grade. Her 9th grader came home with the book Burned since her English class is doing a unit on poetry. She came to the library very distraught and upset. She was agitated and she seemed to be in a rush. After waiting, she seemed to calm down because the staff at the time was currently helping a student and asked her to wait. And during that time, she calmed down and she turned in her paperwork stating that she's requesting that they take this horrible book Burn out of the collection. The staff on hand, which was Nicole Rhodes, she asked her if she would like to be informed of when of the review system. She also reminded her that through the process, this book will continue to stay in circulation, and until a final decision is made, it will continue to circulate. And that if she's unhappy with the results of this meeting, of tonight's meeting, that she can take her reconsideration to administration and ask for another reconsideration meeting. So if you'd like to see the report, you can see that on page 6 and 7. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Ellen Hopkins first. So, Ellen Hopkins was born March 26, 1955. She's 63 years old. She's a freelance writer, poet, and award winning author of 20 nonfiction novels, 3 adult novels, and 13 New York best-selling novels in verse. She is also the author of hundreds of articles on subjects ranging from wine growing to aviation to child abuse. And she is a regular speaker at book festivals, conferences, and schools in the US and throughout the world. She's a large advocate um, for non censorship. Um, she has done many interviews where she talked about how she feels about it, and how she feels about people asking to censor her book. Um, and she is a prolific writer and has been through many, many instances in her life that are reflected in her books. She was adopted as a child and she lived her life. She's gone through abusive relationships with um, partners, and she was able to reconnect with her birth mother, but her birth father did not want to have any interactions with her. She is also a devout um, Catholic and does practice religion. So it's very interesting that today we're going to talk about Burned, which biggest challenge reason is generally the representation of Mormonism and religion in this book. So we're going to talk about Burned now. If you would like to see the many outstanding awards that Miss Hopkins has been awarded, that'll be on page 2. But right now, we're going to talk a little bit about Burned. So, Burned is her 4th free verse novel. It was published in 2006. It is not associated with the other 3 that were written prior. It has gotten a sequel in 2016, and it is a story about Patton, who is a Mormon daughter who lives with her mother, father, and multiple sisters, and has an alcoholic, abusive father. She falls in love and becomes someone infatuated with someone who's not part of her community, who's not a part of her Mormon community, and it doesn't end well for her. Um, and in her rage, she assaults this person and ends up being sent to go live with her estranged aunt. And this is a really good change for her. Um, Overall, this book has not been challenged as much as I would expect it to, because the father generally uses religion to excuse many of his abusive actions. But today, it's being challenged for the religious connotations and for the sexual connotations within the book. So, the potential reasons for this challenge, as I've just stated, is that it's anti religious to some, because of the violence that's in it, because of sexual themes, because it talks about religious gender politics, and because it has bad parental figures or put parental figures under a bad light. Um, Unlike many of Ms. Hopkins' books, Burned is not actually challenged or banned very often. There are 2 cases that I can find, one being a general statement that Burned was made unavailable locally and removed from the libraries and bookstores in 2016 in Texas. And another was Hopkins was banned from attending the Texas Humboldt Independent School District Book Festival in 2010. So most of her books that have had bannings or challenges have been part of her 6-book series, Crank. And then in general, instead of banning specific books, they have decided to ban her as an author and take entire sets of her books out of the collection, or ban her from attending or going places. So if you'd like more information on that, that would be on page 9. So I want to talk a little bit about the value and importance of this book. So the reason why it's so important is it speaks on real issues that teens go through. Patton has to deal with an abusive father, a mother who is checked out and is no longer being responsible, and she just wants to find a space that she can be in where she can feel loved and she can feel supported. And she finds that at her aunt's house, um, which is my second point. It shows that parents are human and that they can be less than perfect, but also the third point, that you can find a good role model in adults other than your parents, that when you have adults around you that aren't being the best that they can be, that there's someone there who can fill that space. um, Her aunt really changes the way she views life and kind of helps her get out of that mindset that, woe is me and everything is bad. And I think that's so important because so many children go through abuse and don't know that there is this support there for them. So this book really shows that support is there for you and that people are willing to invest in you. Um, Another thing it shows that teens are human beings. I think a lot of times it's really hard for parents or for adults to see teens as separate entities and not extensions of their parents. So this book shows that um, Patton really needs and wants to be seen as herself and wants to have the availability to live this life and to be um, needed, to want to have these relationships with people, to be out there and outgoing, and also to see her as a woman and see her as a sexual being, which I think is really important now with our political climate. It's important for us to note that females are just as much sexual beings as males are. So this book is really important because um, Mormonism, or at least in this book, was showing this type of pressure, this type of um, prudence that they really wanted Patton to have, and she just wanted to be loved by someone. And so I think this book was really good in showing that teens are sexual beings and that they do think to that extent, and not just aren't just things. They're people, they're human, they have feelings, and there's a lot in this book that shows support. So if you want more information on that, it'll be on page 7 and 8. So here are some reviews that show, in my opinion, some importance. One is Kirkus review. They say it's sharp and heartbreaking. Booklist says it's troubling but beautifully written. Voya magazine says a compelling and emotional story in a unique way. And the School Library Journal, I took an excerpt from it because it was really long, and it said, once again, the author of Crank has masterfully used verse to recreate the yearnings and emotions of a teenage girl trapped in tragic circumstances. Um, the poems are varied and they captivate readers as they describe Patton's immobilizing fear of her abusive father. There's a talk about disgust with the church hierarchy and how they keep themselves separate from the issues that are created by this practice of religion. They acknowledge that her father is abusive, yet they decide to not do anything about it because it's considered a home life and not a church life type of thing. But she creates this new relationship, and there's a joy of this awakening of romance. And she's the oldest of 8 sisters in this household, so um, it's very it's a very good book for the support of children, of the support of teens. So in conclusion, I want to thank you for your time and let Ellen Hopkins kind of share with you a poem that she wrote herself about censorship.
Manifesto. through zealots and bigots and false patriots who live in fear of discourse, you screamers and banners and burners who would force books off shelves in your brand name of greater good. You say you're afraid for children, innocence ripe for corruption by perversion or sorcery on the page. But sticks and stones do break bones, and ignorance is no armor. You do not speak for me, and will not deny my kids' magic in favor of miracles. You say you're afraid for America, the red, white, and blue corroded by terrorists and socialists, the sexually confused. But we are a vast quilt of patchwork cultures and multi-gendered identities. You cannot speak for those whose ancestors braved different seas. You say you're afraid for God, the living word eroded by Muhammad and Darwin and Magdalene, but the omnipotent sculptor of heaven and earth designed intelligence. Surely you dare not speak for the Father who opens his arms to all. A word to the unwise. Torch every book, char every page, burn every word to ash. Ideas are incombustible, and therein lies your real fear.
So, her words are very powerful, and I want you to think about them when you come to your conclusion about whether or not we want to continue to keep burned in our collection. Again, I want to thank you so much for your time and your patience and for listening to my presentation on this.